of God, most merciful, ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, as was just mentioned, we are now in the second session that has to do with the topic of Imamah. I believe that in the previous session we spent a little bit of time trying to define the notion so that as we get into the topic we all agree on what we're discussing. And we also, in our preliminary remarks, we repeated some of the things that we repeat for every mini-series that we do, which is that these lessons are based on a specific book, so we're following a curriculum, more or less. We're trying to stick as closely as possible to that curriculum. And that's topic one, or point one. Point number two is that as a topic, the topic of Imamah is probably the one that has been the most discussed in Islamic history and Islamic theology more than any other topic. And in fact, it is the main source of contention and the main reason why Muslim scholars or Muslims in general have split into different, we can call them factions or schools of thought or sub schools within Islam. Everything has to do with this topic mainly, and from there a lot of the other topics are kind of derived. So we're not going to repeat all of that, simply to say once again, this is supposed to be a very introductory or beginner class, so we're definitely not going into the details of many of these arguments on what we're presenting and the back and forth between the scholars and the different opinions about each part and each point. There are books of 20 and 30 volumes that have been written about some of the points that we're talking about here, and here we are trying to summarize everything in 3 to 4 lectures. So obviously we're kind of skimming the surface, and a lot of the major points that have to do with this entire theme or topic we're not even addressing at all, we're not even mentioning, and we mentioned a couple of them last time. So keeping all of that in mind, now that the main let's say the definition of the topic has been presented. Now we want to get into a little bit of the kind of main argumentation around it. So we said that the first point that we wanted to talk about has to do for today with the topic of the necessity of the Imamah. Why do we consider Imamah to be a necessary part of our belief system? And not forgetting that this is supposed to be a course or a series on our beliefs. This is a belief system. So we're not talking about Islamic law, we're not talking about Islamic ethics. So why are we discussing the topic of Imamah in a field that is supposed to be about Islamic beliefs or theology? So the structure of the lesson, very quickly, we're going to present a few preliminary remarks, and basically it's to continue off of a main point that we presented in the last time, but due to the brevity or the shortness of the time that we had, we didn't really get into any of the points related to it. And then the lesson is structured with one main introduction, and then the actual argument. Why do we say that the belief in Imamah is necessary? So the preliminary remarks have to do with this main objection that sometimes we hear, whether it's from within Islam or not, that maybe this is a topic that should not be discussed too much. And there's maybe two versions to that argument. Either we consider them two separate arguments or two versions of the same argument. So the first one has to do with the fact that when people get a little bit into the details of the back and forth and the discord and controversies and issues that have arisen throughout Islamic history related to this topic, it may become quickly kind of a turnoff. So it becomes a turnoff. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It may become a turnoff for someone who's new to Islam. So as soon as you get into this topic and you see how complicated it is, or how much history and how loaded it is, and you understand the complexity and the back and forth between the scholars, the schools of thought, you either completely give up hope about the topic and you say it's kind of like if all these people have not been able to sort it out, then who am I to think that I'm going to reach an objective, quick conclusion on my own in this? Or people are simply not going to appreciate the importance of the topic given this history, given the complexity, given the what has happened in the past related to this topic, and it may become not only a turn-off with regards to this topic, specifically the topic of Imamah, it may actually become a turn-off from Islam altogether. So that you want to leave religion behind because you're going to say that religion is always, as usual, the cause of discord, the cause of disunity and disagreement and so on and so forth, and in certain cases it may become a lot even uglier than that. So that's the one version of the argument. And very quickly, the first way to answer this is to say that the way we approach or address this topic needs to be objective. This is not supposed to be about emotions and what I feel and what you feel and what we want to make it about passions and make it personal, make it subjective. As we said very quickly last time, this is supposed to be no different than if you're sitting in a class of chemistry or you're sitting in a class of history and you're trying to reach the truth. So trying to reach the truth, you should put your emotions aside, you should put your biases aside, and you try to study the topic in the most objective way possible, and hopefully that will alleviate or address a lot of the issues right from the beginning. That's one point. The second point is that, the second point is that we do not think that anyone who really objectively studies Islam in general is going to consider this topic as the one that's going to kind of break the camel's back, as we say, because you're still going to appreciate the intrinsic beauty of Islam in every other dimension. So we do not believe that our religion is fragile and frail and vulnerable to the point where if there has been discord and there has been disunity or disagreement about one of its themes, and we may or may not be proud of what has happened in history related to this topic or other ones, this does not take any way from the beauty of Islam in itself as a religion. And once again, this brings us back to the previous point, which is we have to remain objective when we study this topic. And the last point related to this is, if we understand the importance of it, I don't think that this is a topic that we can just ignore. You may postpone it, you may say this is not a priority for me. But if you see that there is any topic that has been addressed to this point, that has been researched to this point, whether it's within our religion, which makes it tenfold more important because now it's related to your spirituality and eternal salvation potentially, or not, any topic, if you go back in history, if you go in science, if you go in history, any field of human research, and you see that there has been so much importance given to it, I think it's at least worth investigating and trying to reach your own conclusion about it before jumping to deciding that you're not going to touch this or this is a turn-off and might as well leave the entire field alone because there's a sub-area in that field that has not been maybe addressed in the most objective way always. The second version of this objection to studying the topic of Imamah is generally related to the notion of unity and disunity within Islam. And I'm not going to give a whole lecture on the importance of unity in Islam. Islam considers unity extremely important, and I don't think we even need to speak from an Islamic point of view. I think anyone who understands how societies work will understand that your strength is in your unity, not in your disunity. And generally speaking, the only ones who will benefit are the ones who are trying to attack this group of people called Muslims. They are the only ones who are going to benefit from having discord and disagreement and disunity resulting from a topic like Imamah. Okay, so everybody is going to agree on this. However, this does not mean that for the sake of unity, we're not going to try to find the truth. These are two completely separate things. We are trying to find the truth, not just to find the truth. That in itself is a noble endeavor. What we're trying to do here, and as we said here, this is a beginning, an introductory class, But in general, in our lives, what we're trying to do is to find a truth that most likely is going to have some relevance for what we believe is going to be our eternal salvation. So if what's at stake is my eternal salvation, I think that it would be worth investigating. It would be worth looking into. And here is where I need to reach my own truth regarding this topic. So before I get into the topic of unity and disunity or strategic goals or things like that at a much higher level, I need to concentrate first on my own spirituality and what I consider to be convincing or not as in terms of a belief system. Okay, so that's point number one. A second point is, once again, concentrating on the logical dimension of the discourse or the rational aspect. And it's quite, it's a shame, it's quite unfortunate that a topic that is supposed to be addressed objectively or that's supposed to be addressed rationally, logically, would lead to this kind of, passions that become a lot more, that become violence, that become hatred, that become enmity, that become injustice, and so on and so forth. Especially from people, all of these people consider themselves Muslims. All of them repeat day and night that there's no compulsion in religion, that you are supposed to reach these truths on your own as a result of your own investigation. So if this is what you truly believe in, then how can researching a topic objectively, scientifically, as we say, rationally, lead to this kind of enmity? I may reach my conclusion and you reach yours, and at the end, if we have a disagreement, I present my arguments and you present yours, and that's it. Okay, so that's the second point. This third point is, I think we do have to distinguish between what we consider strategic alliances, and this is way beyond this specific topic, but it touches this topic, and actually having what we can call an ideological identity with someone. That I say, I'm going to agree or disagree with you, I'm going to work or not work with you based on a fully shared belief system. Not in every case, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm not going to only work with someone in every case only if they agree with me on every point in my belief system. I sometimes am going to be joining forces with you, creating a united front with you, because we have something in common. This does not necessarily mean that I'm going to agree or disagree with you on every point in my belief system. These are two completely separate topics. One of them is more pragmatic and strategic, and one has to do with your worldview and your ideology. So let's not mix these two together. And the last point, and perhaps relevant for people who know a little bit of history and they know what these days are supposed to be, these days are supposed to be the birth of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and perhaps his life can be used as an inspiration and as a source of lessons for people who are trying to strike the right balance between having the right belief system and saying what you believe and being open about it and saying I disagree with this and I agree with this, and at the same time being sincere and being honest and being truthful to Islam. Imam Ali alayhi salam had disagreements with the people who took over the Khilafah in his time. And anyone who goes back in history is going to find very clear evidence of this. But at the same time, he remained an honest, a sincere advisor to them and to the rest of the Muslim world throughout his life. And he did not cause disunity. He never became the cause of disunity. He did not become the cause of the issues that today we may start linking back to this kind of topic, when he would have been the person who is the most involved and the most concerned by this topic. So if you study the life of the Imam, you see that on the one side, he was able to maintain what he considered to be his right or his truth on the one side, and at the same time, he remained loyal, he remained sincere, he remained honest, and no one could ever go back and say that he was the cause of disunity or the cause of disagreement or fragmentation of the, let's say, Islamic world. Okay, so these were simply some points related to the topic that we were supposed to address in the last lecture, but we didn't have time. So this is to wrap it up, and then we get into the actual topic for today. Very quickly, the main difference between the two biggest schools of thought in Islam. And here the point is not so much the biggest difference between the two as making sure that we understand what the Shia believe, because that is not always well understood. When people have not really studied a lot of theology, they get the idea, or they believe maybe in the idea, that on the Sunni school of thought, the Holy Prophet at the time of his passing away did not appoint a successor, and he left things to be decided by the Ummah for all sorts of reasons. But generally speaking, at a high level, that's the belief. And the majority in the Sunni world, and perhaps even some in the Shia world, sometimes believe that on the Shia side, what they believe is that the Holy Prophet decided in his life to appoint a successor who would succeed to him in the position of Khilafah after he passes away, and that would be Imam Ali alayhi salam. Okay, so that's the high level. And given, I'm not going to repeat what we presented in the last time, the context that we presented in the last time, but what happens next? So what happens next to address the state of the Islamic world? What happened next? So if we move past the point of the Holy Prophet, we'll come back to it. So the first Khalifa becomes Abu Bakr, the first Khalifa. At the time of his passing away, he appoints the second Khalifa, Umar ibn al-Khattab. So this is a nomination. On his deathbed, part of his wasiyah, part of his will, he says the Khalifa after me is going to be Umar ibn al-Khattab. At the time of the passing away of Umar ibn al-Khattab, he elects a group, a committee of 6 people, and he says those 6 people are going to determine how the next Khalifa is going to be decided. And I don't want to go into the full history of that, but maybe very quickly. The people that Umar ibn al-Khattab chose are considered to be the people who are the most influential, the most knowledgeable, and in his own words, 6 people that the Holy Prophet would have been pleased with when he passed away. So he specifically chose 6 people. They were Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Uthman ibn Affan, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Talha and Zubayr, and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. Those 6 people were chosen by Umar ibn al-Khattab based on certain criteria. We explained some of them. But he also added the mechanism through which their vote was supposed to happen. So he said that those 6 people are going to be locked up, and they have 3 days to come up with the name of the next Khalifa. If all 6 of them agree, it's easy. If 5 of them agree and 1 of them disagrees, that one is to be killed. If 4 of them agree and 2 of them disagree, those 2 are to be killed. If 3 of them agree and the 3 others disagree, then whoever Abdul Rahman ibn Auf is part of, that's the group that will decide who is going to be the Khalifa. And the 3 others are to be killed. And then he asked his son, Abdullah ibn Umar, he asked him to also join them, although he is not one of the 6 officially, and he told him, side with the majority, and if there is no majority, then side with Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. So the point here is not specifically about, the details of this. The point is to see how the Khalifa was chosen at that time. And I'm not going to go through all the details. This is how Uthman ibn Affan was chosen as the 3rd Khalifa. They came at the end, it was between Imam Ali alayhi salam and Uthman. The conditions that were presented to Imam Ali was that he would rule as a Khalifa based on the Book of Allah, the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet, and the Sunnah or the tradition of the 2 Sheikhs before him, Abu Bakr and Umar. So Imam Ali alayhi salam said, I will rule and apply the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet and my own judgment. They came to Uthman ibn Affan, they repeated the same conditions, and he said yes to all 3 conditions. So the Book of Allah, the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet, and the Sunnah of the 2 Sheikhs. And so Uthman ibn Affan was chosen. So if you go back to Tariq al-Tabari, if you go to other histories, this is very clear. If you move to the time of Uthman ibn Affan left this world, he was killed, he was assassinated, he left this world without putting any mechanism in place or appointing anyone following him. At that time, it was basically a revolution against him. He was assassinated, and the people, the majority of the people, came to Imam Ali alayhi salam, who initially asked them to leave him alone, and they kind of forced him, so he accepted the bay'ah. Now, if you fast forward to a few years later, in the Khilafah of Imam Ali alayhi salam, so he is killed, he is assassinated with an alliance between Muawiyah and the Khawarij, and Muawiyah takes the Khilafah by force. So if you go to the Islamic political theory that ensued, that followed all of these events, if you go to the Sunni side, the Sunni school about their political theory, they will say that there are at least 3 very clear mechanisms of getting the Khilafah, of reaching the throne of the Khilafah. One of them is by direct appointment by the Khalifa who was before you. Or there can be a committee of people who are considered influential politically and who are knowledgeable and who are respected, whose opinion is worth something in society, who decide together, as happened with the second Khalifa, with the third. Or someone may actually take it by force, as Muawiyah did. Now, of course, as we said, this is all, we're talking high level. There are many, many variations. There are scholars who agree with this, scholars who disagree, and there are other sub-theories under there. But these are at least 3. And then there's another opinion, which is there is no prescribed way for the Islamic world to be ruled by whoever happens to be the head of state. The Holy Prophet left it to the Ummah to decide whatever they deemed best at that time. Now, the description that we gave, from at least the Shia point of view, is considered extremely problematic. The biggest points of the problems related to this is, first of all, and it's problematic from a political aspect, problematic from a religious aspect, problematic from a theological. We're not going in the details here. The first point, the first problem that we have with this is, what's the legitimacy? Where does the authority come from for someone to appoint someone after them? What made them legitimate in the first place to make someone else legitimate? Where does that legitimacy come from? Is it religious? Is it political? Is it social? Is it by majority? We need to address that. The second point related to this is that if you go back to the behavior of the Holy Prophet and what he had put in place in terms of principles, in terms of Islamic teachings, it gives the impression that the people who followed the Holy Prophet were more concerned about his ummah than he was about his own ummah. So these people, whoever happened to be a Khalifa after him, and including the Muslim scholars who wrote about political theory in Islam and so on and so forth, everybody seems to be more concerned about what happens to this world that the Holy Prophet created and put in place and sacrificed everything he had to create and to protect. And at the end, when he leaves, he just leaves it to be without any instruction. Whatever happens, happens. Let the people decide for themselves, and it stops. As simple as that. Whereas the people who came after the Prophet seem to have either cared more, given more importance, looked at it in a different way, that gives the impression that they were more concerned than he was about it. That's one angle. That is very problematic too. Another problem is if we consider it with regards to the behavior of the Prophet during his life. He was not known to do anything without having a clear leader over the people who are there. So he says if there are 3 people praying, one of them should be Imam. When he leaves the city in which he is, whether it was Mecca or Medina, he always appointed an Imam behind him, someone to succeed, someone to lead. So in his behavior, the Holy Prophet established these principles as though there's always a need. The people are in need of a leader. So would it make sense to say that the Holy Prophet did not leave a leader after his own passing away? Yes?
Sayyid, I had a quick question. On the Sunni side, whenever they speak to a person who's Shia, they require proof of them that he appointed Imam Ali. What hadith, what Quranic verses, what evidence do you have? But on the Shia side, when you ask someone that's Sunni, is there proof that they have that the Prophet said in a hadith, I am not appointing anybody, I am leaving it for the Ummah? Or is it just assumed, like he never discussed it one way or the other? Is there evidence that they bring forward? Or
No,
they just say he
yeah.
never discussed it at all?
There's no
Without
direct, there's no direct evidence. It's inferred.
So there's
It's
no hadith
inferred
saying,
that-
I'm leaving it for my Ummah.
Yeah, there is no.
We should ask them then to produce hadith to prove that.
No, it's not as simple as that. Well, okay, you're simplifying a little too much, but yes. It's an inference.
Okay.
That based on everything that had happened, the Ummah was now ready to take charge of itself and its political affairs and so on and so forth. And then, if you add to it the fact that the Holy Prophet, and everybody agrees on this, he had warned his followers, he had warned the Muslims that there will be discord, there will be disagreement, there will be disunity amongst them. So in other words, you are being warned that there are dangers related to that will lead to disunity. Would he not put things in place to make sure that that disunity not take place, and would not the appointment of a leader be directly related to that or not? Okay, so these are some of the biggest, we said it's problematic, or there are problematic issues related to that. These are the biggest problems, but as we said, we're not going in the details here. So what is the actual Shia belief? Because we said when we began, that the majority opinion thinks that the Holy Prophet would have appointed someone during his lifetime, and that person would be the Imam Ali alayhi salam. The Shia actually don't believe it in that manner. Or we have to be very clear in how we say it. The Shia do not believe that the Holy Prophet personally appointed Imam Ali as an Imam to succeed after him. The Shia believe that it's God who appointed Imam Ali to a position of continuing the divine mission after the Prophet through this person. In other words, the Prophet has no say who this person is. Just like no one has a say who the Prophet is. This is a divine role. It's not a political role. And here is the entire problem, the entire difference. And we talked about it the first time we talked, when we said we have to clearly define what we mean by Imam. If what we mean by Imam is the political role, then of course there is no issue that people, if there is no divinely appointed person, that the people get together and choose who their Imam is. Or that there's absolutely no necessity for an Imam to be, let's say, infallible, or to have any divine knowledge, or so on and so forth, because we're limiting it to a political role, just like we find today in any society with a need for a political role. But if you say the role that this person is going to play is a divine role, which is what the Shia actually believe, they do not say that the Holy Prophet decided personally. He looked around and he looked at all his companions and all the followers, and he said, this person is the most fit to follow in my footsteps and to lead the Ummah. They don't believe that. The Shia believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Prophet, just like he ordered him how to pray and how to fast, he ordered him to appoint Ali ibn Abi Talib as someone to succeed and continue the divine mission after him. So this is the whole key, and this is why we said we have to be very precise in what are we discussing, if there is a disagreement, where is it? And if we can't agree on this point, then the discussion is going to be kind of between two people who haven't even agreed on the definition of the terms in the first place. Okay? So until now we haven't actually argued anything. We're just trying to understand where the discussion is, where the arguments are. And here the reason why the Shia believe this, the main reasons is, first of all, they say that this is the direct link between the mission of the Holy Prophet specifically and the manner in which, so this is if we go back to the topics of general prophethood and specific prophethood, then we're going to explain it in a second. But there's a clear link between this idea of Imamah that the Shia have and the eternity of the religion of Islam. Is this religion good, and is it universal? So is it good for everyone, and is it good for the rest of time or not? We have to agree on that. And if we agree on that, then we have to go back to the life of the Holy Prophet and the religion that was put in place to see, does it serve that purpose or not? Or does it open the door to maybe another attack on Islam, directly or indirectly? And this is the reason why, again, to understand the topic properly, this is the main reason why the Shia do not discuss the topic of Imamah as though it is some sort of derivative legal. It's not in the ahkam, it's not a legal matter in the Shia world to discuss the topic of Imamah. It's one of the main articles of faith. If you believe that the Holy Prophet is a Holy Prophet, if you believe that Islam is the last of religions, then you must have an answer about your belief about Imamah. Because the belief in Imamah is directly related to a divine role. It's not related to political theory, let's call it. If it was, then it would be discussed in ahkam, it would be discussed in law, it would be discussed in fiqh. So the Shia don't discuss this as a matter of fiqh, they discuss this as a matter of belief. And that's why we're talking about it here, right? As part of a course on beliefs. And that's why we said, initially, when we started talking about the topic of Imamah, we said, if you believe that this is going to be a divine role, then the conditions for the person fulfilling it are going to be very different than if you believe that this is going to be a political role. So if you believe this is a divine role, in other words, it's going to bring you back to the topic of prophethood. Right? Except that it's not a prophet. This is not a new revelation. This is not a new scripture. This is not a new religion. It's an application of what has been put in place. No different than happened with the other prophets. So this is why we say it's a divine appointment. It's not a personal appointment. It's not a preference. It's not a subjective desire. The person needs to have access to divine knowledge, and the person needs to be infallible. No different than prophets are. And that brings us back to the topic of infallibility. We're not going to go back into it now, but that links to that whole topic. So, the necessity of the Imam. So why do the Shia actually believe that the Imam is necessary? So if you remember, very quick recaps. In lesson 22, we talked about, and this was general prophethood, we said, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send prophets in the first place? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we studied his attributes, we said one of his attributes is that he has wisdom and he has lordship, and therefore when he creates with purpose. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never create creatures without guiding them, without allowing them to reach the purpose for which they were created, and so on and so forth. So that part should be clear. And we linked, when we went into general prophethood, we linked the necessity of prophethood to that attribute from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We linked it to the key attribute of wisdom, hikmah, right? So we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given human beings access to certain types of knowledge. So we have our empirical five senses, and we have our reason, and we have our fitrah, we have our instincts. But what do we have to allow us to understand what happens in the afterlife? What gives us the knowledge? Our knowledge, what we have been given access to, is limited. We may understand high level, but the details, we don't have access to them. So we need another source of knowledge, and we call that revelation. So revelation is to come and give you the missing, the gap, everything that is not reachable, not accessible to you through your human means, through your material means, through your logic. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give you the information. No one here can go to after death and see what happens, and whether there is Jannah and Nar, and what they look like, and what do you do here to get what there. This is where the revelation comes in and gives you that gap. Okay? So this is a part of that discussion. Inshallah, you can go back to it if you've missed it. So we said the roles, the big roles that the prophets play are what? First of all, they give you the theoretical knowledge. They explain. They teach. And this is in theory. Then they teach with the words, but they also teach with their actions. So this is the practical. So you learn more from a prophet who is with you by watching them and by emulating their behavior. You see how they act with people before you hear the words that they're saying. Someone may tell you all they want, you have to be good to the poor, you have to be nice to the orphans, but they don't actually apply that. There's not a lot of teaching happening there. Whereas if you see that in action without even the person saying the words, it goes a lot further. And the prophets play that role in their societies. Hence the need for human prophets, not angel prophets, and we talked about all of that. There's another role that the prophets are supposed to play, which is the spiritual purification of the people. And there's always a tazkiyah, always mentioned in the verses of the Quran, and we'll mention some of them. But then, so this is all at the individual level, and then there is also the there's a social or collective level, there's a historical level. They are supposed to give you, as a person and as a society, a balanced system. A system that gives the right place and the right weight and the right value to every dimension of your life. Your physical, your psychological, your spiritual, your financial. Who is going to be able to balance all of this for you in the perfect way? Only your Creator, and He communicates that to you through the prophets. So this is a balanced system. And then creating the environment for those people to be able to live the life they are meant to live, to be able to reach the purpose for which they were created. And if you live in a vacuum, or you live in a society that goes completely against that, that becomes, I'm not going to say impossible, but extremely difficult. So the prophets are always working to try to put in place a balanced, just society so that people can actually live in the manner in which they were supposed to live. Okay, so this was all in the general prophethood. And then we went to specific prophethood. And we talked about the prophethood of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and we talked about the 2 points about Islam, that Islam is a universal religion, and that Islam is the eternal religion. So from the moment it was revealed until the end of times, there will be no other religion, that it will be valid and that will be applicable by all until the end of times. Okay, so those 2 aspects become extremely important now, because now we need to see, so what happens during the time of the Holy Prophet and then after. The role of the Holy Quran. All Muslims believe that all the teachings, all the core principles, all the foundations of Islam are contained in the Holy Quran as is, from cover to cover, right? There's no disagreement amongst any Muslims about that. That's the first point. Except that all Muslims also know that not all the teachings are contained in a detailed manner in the Holy Quran. So if you are to understand Islam, you are supposed to go to the Holy Quran, but the Holy Quran is not going to tell you how you're supposed to pray, or how you're supposed to perform your wudu in detail, or it may, depending on how, we'll come back to the ayah of wudu, the verse of wudu. And these details are supposed to come from somewhere. If they are to come from somewhere, where do they come from? Muslims generally believe that they come from the Holy Prophet. The actions and the sayings of the Holy Prophet, which the Muslims call the Sunnah. Okay, the tradition of the Holy Prophet. This is why the sayings of the Holy Prophet and the actions of the Holy Prophet become the source of religion. They gain the Holy Prophet gains his religious authority, and this is an important point, his hujjiyah, as they say, from the fact that the Quran does not contain the details. If the Quran contained everything and people can just read it and understand and know how to apply it as is, there would be no need for a prophet. Why is there a prophet? It's to get into the details and to show you how all of this is going to be applied in your life. Okay? So this is the religious authority or the hujjiyah of the Holy Prophet. Now, in the verses of the Quran, and we don't have too much time, so without any commentary, all of these points are very, very clear. As we sent you a messenger from among yourselves who recites to you our signs, so this is a teaching, purifies you, teaches you the book and wisdom, and teaches you what you did not know. In another verse, Allah says, Allah certainly favored the faithful when He raised up among them a messenger from among themselves. All of these are important points, we don't have time to comment. To recite to them His signs, to purify them, and to teach them the book and the wisdom. And earlier they had been in manifest error. If I skip the next one, we have sent down the reminder to you, and so this is when we get into the specific role of the Holy Prophet, so that you may clarify for the people that which has been sent down to them, so that they may reflect. We did not send down the book to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, except for the purpose that you may clarify for them what they differ about, and as a guidance and a mercy for people who have faith, and so on and so forth. So this is to clearly establish the place. Yes, everybody agrees that everything is contained in the Quran, but the role of the Holy Prophet is to clarify by applying and giving the details to the people. Okay? Now, we're still in the necessity of the Imam. Circumstances of the life of the Holy Prophet. The Holy Prophet, his mission, a little bit of history, his mission, there was at least 3 years and potentially up to 5 years at the beginning of his mission, where his mission was most historians refer to it as secret. It had not gone fully public yet. So initially the Holy Prophet was a believer with 2 or 3 people around him. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered him, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. He ordered him to start with the closest people to him, to Bani Hashim, and then slowly to the rest of Quraysh, and then slowly to the rest of the Arabs, and then to the rest of the world. This was a progression. It did not happen overnight. But the first 3 years, if you study the life of the Holy Prophet, the historians tell you this was a secret divine mission. Secret in the sense, the Holy Prophet was not going to everyone and saying, I'm the Prophet, you must become a Muslim and believe in this new system. Not at all. This happened much, much later. Okay, so there's 3 years, you take away, it's a 23-year mission. So there's 3 up to 5 years where the mission is secret. If you look at the time that the Holy Prophet spent in Mecca, this was a time of persecution, of injustice, of torture, of anyone who is associated with the Holy Prophet. And this is when the Holy Prophet, at the end, he sent a lot of his followers to Al-Habasha so that they avoid and he defends and he protects them from all of this torture and persecution against them. And he ended up with a group of his family and followers hiding in the valley, Shu'ab Abi Talib. 3 years they hid in there. And where we have in the narrations that they would, 2 and 3 and 4 men would split a single date over days. That's all that they had to eat. And they would eat the leaves of trees when they found them. And they almost starved to death. And no one was allowed to sell or buy anything from them and to them and so on and so forth. This was another 3 years. Okay. And then in the rest of the 23 years, there was another 10 years when the Holy Prophet actually goes to the city of Medina. And then the battles start. And one attack after another. And for 10 years consecutively, the battles did not stop. And in there, in between all of this, in the 23-year period, the Holy Prophet is supposed to teach you everything you need to know about religion. So what ends up happening is that there's a lot of what needs to be applied in religion that people are not ready for, that circumstances don't allow the Prophet to explain the details, to give the theory and to give the principles. The circumstances are this difficulty, always ongoing. It's not a classroom like here where we have someone sitting and explaining you the principles and you're writing and you go back and research them and study them. It was a very difficult time, those 23 years, if you look at the different stages of it. This does not mean that the Holy Prophet has any shortcoming in his efforts. The opposite. The Holy Prophet sacrificed everything and spared no effort, day and night, as the Holy Quran says, killing himself, in the words of the Quran, in order to try to guide, to save his people. So this is not a shortcoming on the side of the Holy Prophet, but these are the circumstances within which he's working, which meant that there's a lot of things that happened during this time that never reached us. 2, there's a lot of things that happened in the time of the Holy Prophet, but they did not reach us fully. 3, there are things that happened in that time, but not enough for every big aspect or dimension of life to be covered in the time of the Holy Prophet. These are the big items, the big ideas, the big themes that need to be covered by Islam. So given this, so if we go, for instance, to the teachings that did make it from the Holy Prophet, and this is where the scholars show their weight, when they go back and they look into the narrations that were left from the time of the Holy Prophet, the prophetic hadith, the prophetic sunnah. If you look at it, can you say that there's absolute unanimity on what is the prophetic sunnah? No, there isn't. If today you take the Muslim world and you ask them, how did the Prophet take something extremely simple that the Prophet would have done publicly again and again every day in front of everyone, and today there is no unanimity on how the Holy Prophet did it, there is no political dimension to it, there is no power dimension to it, there is no financial dimension to it, there is no theological dimension to it. No one has anything to gain or to lose from saying how the Holy Prophet performed his wudu. And there's a huge disagreement among the Muslims, if you go into different schools of thought, on how the Holy Prophet performed his wudu. Where am I supposed to take the rest of the details of my religion if something as neutral and straightforward and should have happened again and again every single day of the life of the Holy Prophet during that 23 years. And certainly the Holy Prophet was not hiding this. Certainly he was teaching his followers the ABCs of religion, including how do you perform your wudu before you stand to pray. And today there is no unanimity on this. This is where the issue happens. If you go back to this, you say, what are the alternatives here? It is not that there is no history. It is not that there are no prophetic traditions. It is not that there is no Quran. All of this is there. But maybe the circumstances and the history that ensued did not, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would know this, that's the argument, did not allow the Holy Prophet to give the full picture of Islam to his followers so that this becomes the eternal universal religion that will be applied. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appointed someone to continue applying the religion. Just like when you wear braces, you can't just fix your teeth on one day and you leave it. You have to leave it in there for a year or two so that you hold it in place. It takes time. It takes time for a culture or a society to be completely uprooted and completely changed and completely reformed and revolutionized like the Holy Prophet was trying to do, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted him to do with the Arabs and the rest of the world to which he was sent. And this is the reason why the Shia believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have asked the Holy Prophet to say, but he's not choosing to say, and this is a person who is going to continue this. Does he come up with a new religion? No. Does he continue the same religion? Yes. He applies the same book and he follows the same sunnah. And that's why he said when he was asked, will you apply the book of Allah? Yes. Will you follow the sunnah of the Prophet? Yes. What about the rest? No, the rest is me. Because I have my own knowledge of what to do and how to apply the religion in my own way. You cannot constrict me or restrain me or bring me back to what was done before me. Okay? Yes?
That portion that he's saying, that I'm going to apply from my own knowledge, is that something that you mentioned before, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have given him that divine revelation that this is what you would want to teach? Or is that he saw our Nabi practicing that, and so then he would tell from that? Which one is it?
Yeah, so the Shia believe that he was given a divine knowledge through the Prophet.
Okay.
Through the Prophet. And he says that. He says the Holy Prophet has taught me 1,000, opened for me 1,000 doors of knowledge. Through them, from each one of them, 1,000 doors of knowledge open. Mm-hmm. We consider that not a normal human knowledge. You can do all you want, you can try all you want, you can pray all you want. This is not the type of knowledge that you need as a simple human being doing your own worship of God. This is the type of knowledge you need because you're playing a divine role. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is equipping you, preparing you, and it's not a random act. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also chooses the best teacher for you. He makes you grow up as he did with all other prophets. If you read their stories, he pairs up a prophet with another prophet so that you learn from them too. His role as an imam does not start until his mission as an imam begins. When the Holy Prophet is there, the Holy Prophet is the imam, and he's the prophet, and he's the messenger, and everybody follows. And as he says, I am one of the servants of Muhammad. But after that, he believes, as we believe too, the Shia, that he also believes that he has a divinely appointed role. Okay, so is it a divine knowledge? Yes, we believe it's divine. But what type of divine? There's a disagreement. So some will say he may have a direct contact. The majority say no, it's all learned from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Like direct contact is in like a...
An inspiration. Yeah. It's not a revelation in the sense of wahi that comes to the Holy Prophet, like Jibreel comes to verses. Yes, okay. Exactly. Okay, so this is wudu, imamah. So in the book of Ghadir, for instance, very quickly, if you want to go into the details, I don't want to go into the details. In the book of Ghadir, Imam al-Alam al-Amini, in his book Al-Ghadir, Mawsu'at al-Ghadir, he mentions at some point, I think it's in volume 5, he says, he has a chapter, it's 80 pages long. He lists the names of 700 narrators. Some of them who have narrated up to 100,000 narrations. And he says, these are known liars in history. And the ulama of the Muslims know that these are the liars. He just compiled them together in one place. Okay, so this is to show what? This is to show that it would be too easy and too cheap, and we would live in a very ideal world if we would say the Sunnah and the teachings of the Holy Prophet were passed down as they are to the Islamic world, as is, without changes and without distortions and without attempts from some people, some of them an accident and unintentionally, but a lot of it, when you go through the lives of these people, known liars. That's why the ulama do not accept their ahadith, but you have to be a alim to know them. You have to be able to say and to distinguish. And a lot of these people were considered alim themselves. Anyways, that's another topic. Okay? In any case, so the big question is, if Islam is universal and if Islam is eternal, and given that everything that we have said now, what happens? What's the alternative? So the answer of the Shia to this alternative is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not leave the world to nothing. Did not leave the teachings of the Holy Prophet and his ahadith and his sunnah to nothing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in place a system which is the chain of Imamah. And so if we go back to the traditions or to the narrations of the Holy Prophet, in which he says there are 12 Imams after me. Now we go back, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. When we talked about prophethood, we said a human being with their own reason, no matter how reasonable and how strong your logic is, you're never going to be able to tell God, at this point in history, to this ummah you need to send another prophet. That's not how it works. You can do it after the fact. After the fact, you can look at a society and analyze it and say, yeah, I understand why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have wanted to send a prophet here at this time to these people. But you can't do it before. You can't predict. Today, maybe if someone would look at the world, the state of the world, they would say, I think we need a new prophet. Based on my reason, based on my analysis, I think we need a new prophet. So assuming they're not Muslim and they don't know that, Islam ended all revelation. What I'm trying to say is we can be as rational as we want. Our reason stops at a point. And the appointment of someone to play a divine role, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَا كَانَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَارَةُ. It's not people who are going to say what their preferences and their desires and their whims are. These are divine roles. So although we are rationalizing it and presenting the philosophy behind it, the truth is whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have chosen 3 or 125,000 prophets, that's up to Him. Right? This is the part that your human reason is always going to fall short. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides or not to add another chain of divine people to play a divine role that we're referring to as Imamah or not, we can rationalize it. But at the end, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who knows the future, who knows if it's needed or not, and who decides with His grace and with His mercy what is needed for humanity. What establishes the argument fully or not for humanity. So the Shia response, as we said, to what happens if this religion is universal and if this religion is eternal, what is the answer? If we're saying that we have huge issues with the manner in which it was transmitted, there's a lot of disagreement, there's a lot of discord, there's not a lot of consensus about everything that happened during the time of the Holy Prophet, or how this religion is supposed to be applied from something as simple as wudu to things like we're discussing right now, like Imamah. Okay, so what's the answer? The answer of the Shia was that there is a divinely appointed role that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to keep in place after the Holy Prophet, and this is the role that they refer to as Imamah. And this is the reason why the Shia believe that the Imam has to be, 1, divinely appointed, 2, they have to have divine knowledge, and 3, they have to be infallible. Because they're basically playing the same prophetic role without the new revelation, without the scripture, but they were playing a divine role. So the same things that we said when we talked in lesson 22, when we said these are the roles of the prophet, well, these are the roles of the Imam. No different. People have to be able to look at them and say, this person represents religion. They need to be infallible. When I ask them, they need to answer, just like a prophet would. They don't make mistakes. They don't forget. Because if they forgot here, they may forget in the things related to religion. If they make mistakes here, they may make mistakes in Revelation. And we talked about all the different theories about that, so we're not going to go back into all of this. As opposed to when we put all of this together, this is the reason why, if we go back to the Sunni version of the theory of Imamah, and this is why we said when we started this whole topic, we said there is a difference in the definition of Imam that leads to a lot of miscommunication between people. If at the beginning I say, this is what I believe in the Imam, well, we're probably going to agree not to both refer to the same thing with the same word. But unfortunately, everybody refers to two very different entities as an Imam. Yes, linguistically, Imam is a leader, and it could be an Imam of anything. But in the theological dimension of Islam, I don't know what happened. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Maybe we'll just continue.
Yeah, we'll finish it. So, very quickly, if we go to the Sunni version of the theory of Imamah, there is no such claim that an Imam has to be infallible, that an Imam has to be divinely appointed, that an Imam has to have divine knowledge. In fact, we have a lot of the opposite. We have a constant reminder that the people who have played the role of Imamah, in what sense? Not in the sense of the divine role that the Shia believe in the sense of the political ruler, the political leader. We have again and again narrations that tell us it was fine, they're just human beings, they need the help of people. And if we go right from the beginning, right? Abu Bakr, when he became the Khalifa and he took to the pulpit and he said, there is a devil that overcomes me, right? إِنَّ لِي شَيْطَانًا يَعْتَرِينِي. And so I'm going to need your help, my people. When you see that I am upright, support me in being upright. And when you see that I make mistakes, make me upright again. This was one of his first sermons. Okay, if you go to the Khilafah of Umar, during his time as Khalifa, so this is when they are supposed to be the Imam. But again, this is to show that there's a huge discrepancy or difference in the definition of what we mean when we say Imam. If you believe that we're talking about the political rulership, then there's no issue with that. If you believe we're talking about the divine appointed role, there's an issue. Okay, imagine, so you'd have to basically imagine, would a prophet say something like this? He can't. It goes the opposite. If a normal human being says it, it can become a manqaba, it can become a compliment. This person is modest, this person is democratic, this person knows how to talk to their people, they are being open and honest with them. But this is because you're not adding the divine dimension, which says, well, if a prophet tells people that I may make a mistake at any point, I think we have an issue with your revelation. Or, when he says, for instance, Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he talks about the Khilafah of Abu Bakr, and he says, Al-Bay'ah of Abu Bakr was a falta, was an accident or a slip. وَقَلَّهُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ شَرَّهَا. Okay, why? This basically tells us there is no prescribed way. Something was done. The Holy Prophet left this world. We improvised something. It could have gone in a completely different direction, but thank God it went in the correct way and not a lot of damage was done and everything was good. Okay, what does this say? This say that there is no general agreement on this is the way that Islam says a political ruler is established or not. Another point, when Umar ibn al-Khattab again and again openly, especially during his Khilafah, because he would get all these delegations from people coming from, there were the Jews, there were Christians, there were atheists, they would come, they would argue, and they would want answers, and they challenged the Muslim world. And in every case, he would call Imam Ali. And there are entire books written, لَوْلَا عَلِي لَهَلَكَ عُمَرْ, because these became famous words that Umar ibn al-Khattab would say. لَوْلَا عَلِي لَهَلَكَ عُمَرْ مَا أَبْقَانِيَ اللَّهِ لِمُعَضَلَةٍ لَيْسَ لَهَا أَبًا حَسَنٍ. Again and again. Why? No problem. It's actually a compliment. It's beautiful that he recognizes the knowledge, he recognizes the merit of Imam Ali. But this would be a problem if we say he's playing a divine role. And again, I'm mentioning all of these to really make the point very clear. There is a huge difference in the definition of what an imam is and isn't. The Shia do not believe that an imam is a political ruler. The imam is continuing the role of the prophet. The same role that the prophet played, the imam plays. The difference is that there is no new religion. He takes whatever the prophet put in place and he continues to apply it so that the people learn. And that's it. So this makes it a very different role. And when you have someone like that in society, then as a derivative of that, would you not also ask them to be the ruler in that society, the political leader in that society? So the political rulership becomes a secondary thing derived of their divine role. No different than when the Holy Prophet is there, no one would think of putting a Khalifa in place and the Holy Prophet is there. Because the Holy Prophet can play all of those functions, and we spend a lot of time talking about the non-religious functions that the Holy Prophet played. And of course, if you go back to, that's the whole discussion related to, infallibility. So were there mistakes made or not? Especially if you go, the history of the Bani Umayyah, Bani Abbas, their Khulafa, how they got to power. Were there mistakes or not? This is all to reinforce the same point. Are we talking about political rulership? Are we talking about kings and Khulafa and heads of state? Or are we talking about divine role? Okay, so in the next lecture, inshallah, we're going to talk about the two big aspects. So the first lecture is going to be about the nomination or the appointment. What do we mean when we say Allah appointed? What is the proof for that? That's one. And two, these other traits. So we said there's three big ones. We said the Shia believe that the Imam is someone who's divinely appointed. So that's lecture, the next lecture. And we said it's someone who has a divine knowledge and they're infallible. So we'll explain those two in the lecture after that. Okay, so those are going to be the next two lectures. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.